the mobility of workers in the US is almost second nature. We were recently in Canada. Again, you know, the housing market has so much to do with mobility. You know, normally what it used to be, at least, that you turned around, sold your house, and you're already, you know, got a new house over there, 200 kilometers, 300 miles, or whatever you got. You move to the new job, and that's what's second nature. The children get into the new school, everybody gets a... This is kind of unheard of in places like Europe, for example. The mobility is so limited. The housing markets don't work like that. It's that's one of the things that, by the way, that limit the labor market's potential, and of course why we still have 10% unemployment in many countries in the euro area. So here the question of needing assistance moving to a region where the jobs are available. Now, we just published yesterday the Economic Survey of the United States. It's good reading, by the way. It's interesting. It also makes a very, I think, objective, and I would say, yes, very positive balance of President Obama's handling of the US economy from the depth of the crisis to today. It includes recommendations on helping displaced workers get back to work. Now, to stop the populist appeal of protectionism, we also have to ensure people understand the current global context. Again, it's not easy. You know, we have to do all these difficult things. First of all, we have to understand them ourselves. Then we have to explain this to people. You know, this is why our friends in the media are so important, because they have to help educate the many. Now, most trade today is in intermediate goods. Firms are importing world-class goods, and they're importing world-class services to add value, improve productivity, and increase competitiveness, which they then sell in domestic and export markets. People have to understand that a tax on imports is like a tax on the most competitive firms and a tax on exports. This is something which is now very obvious, and when we've been able to, Mr. Ash here has been able to deliver the whole mapping of the trade of the world in value-added terms, looking at the micro data, and then it's very obvious, you know, don't put import taxes because you're shooting yourself on the foot. You know? Before, all the trade negotiations were about, okay, you dismantle the tariff in leather, and I will dismantle it on TVs, and you dismantle in cars, and I'll dismantle in textiles. It was all, and basically now unilateral disarmament is the smartest move. Huh? It's not quite yet there as a very generalized conviction, but basically it's about keeping more competitive by not putting artificial elements of, you know, of just making more expensive your imports, and therefore making more expensive your exports or even your domestic goods. Policies that restrict access to foreign sources of intermediate goods and services are more likely to produce firm closures and job losses, the very outcomes they were designed to prevent. So it's a complete paradox, it's a loser. This is borne out by the data. Almost 10% of US jobs depend on exports, half of which are with firms that are indirect exporters. Large share of those jobs is in services, many of which are embodied in manufactured goods. Our work shows, please listen to this one. This is very, very interesting. Our work shows more than half of the value added of manufactured exports comes from the service sector. You say, my God, which normally you have manufacturers and you have agriculture and they have services, you know. Now, well, what we're saying is, when it comes to value added, which is the real McCoy, half of the value added of the exports of manufactured goods are constituted by services. Let me tell you something, practical implications of something like this. Well, we said this to the Germans a few years ago, based on Mr. Ash's discoveries. We said to them, listen, it's very simple. You no longer export cars, you export code with wheels. Which means, if you don't get the code right, the export of cars is in danger. Because 70% of the value added is code. So you better get productive on the services, because you are already very, very productive on the exports of manufacturers. So, a lot of people were not aware of the connection, the nexus between the two things, and how absolutely indispensable to keep the productivity and the competitiveness of the manufacturing is our services. Well, now we know better. It's documented. The numbers are very clear. So now there's no excuse. Now, people have to understand most trade is trade in products that are used to produce other products. And as friends of trade, we have to make this message clear. Now, the OECD role. The OECD is helping governments in these endeavors. Our work on global value chains is helping understand the effect of globalization on trade. In particular, the joint OECD WTO Trade in Value Added initiative addresses the value added by each country in the production of goods and services that are consumed worldwide. We're also developing an approach that integrates FDI flows into the TIVA framework, and which shed light on the trade investment nexus. Now, I remember that with a little bit of hyperbole, but not too much, I announced, was it 2 years ago, I think, at our ministerial council meeting in the trade section of the ministerial council meeting, the second day, with all the trade ministers around the table, that we had decoded the trade genome. You know, just like when you decoded the human genome, big breakthrough. Well, because we had done the global value chains, and now we had updated the numbers, and by going micro to micro data, national accounts, massive number crunching, but then going micro data, we had actually been able to constitute the global value chains country by country and sector by sector. And then we went a step further, the value added, expressed flows expressed in value added. If we had these figures before, we wouldn't have any discussions about protectionism. The surplus of China with the United States, when you're talking value added, is reduced by more than 1/3. It's massive. Then we went for the services, which, as we said here, in OECD countries are more than half of the added value in exports. And last but not least, we went for, having agreed on the trade facilitation agreement, you said, how do you operationalize it? We produce a trade facilitation indicators so that we can actually gauge where we are. It's the GPS of trade facilitation.